You cannot spend your way out of recession or borrow your way out of debt. Everyone knows that Britain is worse off than any other country as we go into these hard times. The IMF has said so. The European Commission has said so. The markets have said so, which is why our currency has devalued by 30%, and soon the voters too will get their chance to say so. They can see what the markets have already seen, that you are the devalued Prime Minister of a devalued government.
Daniel Hannan on our Newsmakers line from Brussels, Belgium. Daniel, good to have you with us.
Well, you know, I could die and go to heaven now, Steve. Here I am on your show listening to my speech to the tune of Hail to the Chief. I mean, what else does life hold for me?
Daniel, here's the plan. Yeah, Barack Obama may have pulled this off. We hide your birth certificate. We run you for president in 2012. They'll never stop you. They didn't stop Barack Obama, and we haven't seen his birth certificate. We just bury yours. You can be the next president of the United States. Yeah, and it'll make up for that whole American Revolution thing 200 years ago.
I just adore your country. I like everything about your country. But the thing I like best about it is the Constitution. And I'm a bit of a strict interpretationist on the Constitution.
You'd be the first president we've had in a long time that actually would adhere to the Constitution.
I'm very big on that, and so I'd feel kind of bad about the native-born bit, you know?
Can we at least declare you an honorary American and get you to tune in from time to time and tell us what we should be doing?
I declared myself an honorary American a long time ago. I think the rest of the world owes a huge amount to your country. I think we could learn a lot, and not least in the European Union. If we had a constitution that was remotely like yours, it would be a much happier place.
By the way, I just wish that we would have kept one thing, or at least adopted one thing that our British cousins do in the Parliament, where you get to bring the leader in and literally just kind of spank him in the question and answer session. We should do that here.
I think that would be a good thing. I mean, in general, you've got the better of it because you've got a proper division of powers, and I can see how you would take this for granted. But having a proper independent legislature where you also have open primaries means that with all their problems, your congressmen never forget who they have to work for. And, you know, when you had your bailout, the guys who voted for it knew that they were going to have to go back home and explain themselves to their taxpayers. Now, that just doesn't happen in the UK or indeed in most of the rest of the world. You know, our bailout was decreed by Gordon Brown without even summoning Parliament. You know, we went through a civil war in my country to establish the principle that only Parliament could raise taxes, and now we've kind of thrown that away. So I think you've got a pretty good model where you still have a more or less powerful independent legislature. But yeah, I think it would be brilliant if you could come and if you could summon the members of the executive and kick them around from time to time. Maybe not the president. He's your head of state, you know, and I think...
Hey, we'd be satisfied with Tim Geithner and Hillary Clinton. Tim Geithner, Hillary Clinton. We could take a few shots at them.
Sign me up for that. Sign me up for that completely.
Now, you have this video has gone so viral, and by the way, we've got Daniel's blog linked up on our website, so you can read some of his comments about other issues and how the pushback. The British have such a tempered tone when it comes to insults. I mean, the newspapers called you a daft wee boy. I mean, that's the best they can deliver back when they're really kind of wanting to rip the bark off you. He's a daft wee boy. I mean, that's not going to get you in a bar fight in America, Daniel.
Do you know, I mean, how's this for a really English story? The guy who wrote that, I then bumped into in my club, okay? And whereas it's pretty much what your listeners would imagine an English club to be, and that he acted in a very English way, you see, where it should have led to a bar fight.
Was he wearing women's clothes?
English, he kind of mumbled and looked at his shoes and said, "Oh, I'd forgotten you were a member here," and scuttled off.
Now this viral video has gotten attention all over the world. It millions and millions of views, and yet literally the BBC, the Guardian, which again is not your newspaper, you're the Telegraph. They basically ignored you, except for taking kind of a daft wee boy pot shot at you.
It's funny. I mean, maybe this happens on your side of the Atlantic as well, but quite often here you find that there is a difference between what the politicians and the media elites think and then what everybody else turns out to think. And the political elites can talk each other into a great frenzy about something without pausing to look over their shoulders and see whether anyone else actually agrees with them. And this spending and borrowing package is a really good example of that. There was an immediate consensus in what we would call the Westminster Village, I suppose what you might call inside the Beltway, that it was a good thing, that something had to be done. You know, that frightful phrase, doing nothing is not an option. I don't know if you say it over there. If there is a less true thing in politics, I've yet to hear it. Doing nothing is very often the correct option. And then it turns out that the people who were signing the checks for all this weren't very happy about it. Nobody had trouble to ask them. And when people did trouble to ask them, they got a pretty uncompromising message.
Talk a little bit about the chaos we're seeing surrounding this whole G20 gathering in London. I mean, the chaos on the streets may be only secondary to the chaos inside the meetings, at least the intellectual chaos. It's just you can see it better on the streets. What is going on over there in London?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's chaotic on the street. I don't know what those guys on the street are for. It's pretty clear what they're against. I was doing something in a TV studio with one of them yesterday. I said, "What are you guys for? I've got what you're against." And he just repeated what he was against. You know, it's going to be an awkward moment if one of them says, "What do we want?" and nobody knows how to continue the chant. But inside, I mean, basically, you've got two sides, both pushing bad ideas. You've got the British and American governments pushing the bad idea that what we need is to spend and borrow more. And then you've got the French and German governments pushing the idea that what we need is to regulate more. And it's often the way of these international summits that you end up with a kind of worst possible compromise where they kind of half do both of those bad things. I actually, now this may sound really unpatriotic of me, but I am hoping for a miserable failure. I hope the thing breaks up without any agreement at all.
Be careful; they're going to go all Rush Limbaugh on you, man, and say you want this thing to fail, and they're going to kind of give you the Rush Limbaugh treatment.
I would rather that the thing. No deal is better than a bad deal, right? Now, in a perfect world, there's a good deal out there. The good deal would be open your market, try and complete the world trade round, and try and act against non-tariff trade barriers, by which I include things like subsidizing car manufacturers, nationalizing banks, saying British jobs for British workers on our side of the Atlantic, or the Buy America clause on your side of the Atlantic.
Oh, just having hidden rules and regulations.
That would be a success.
The hidden rules and regulations that are kind of tucked into a drawer. It's like, oh, we forgot to mention this regulation that keeps your product out or delays your product from getting here, all that kind of stuff that makes a mess of things. I got to tell you, the European Union was something that a lot of people were questioning, but when you look at guys like Václav Havel, the president, who's more conservative than our own president, when we got guys like you speaking up in the European Parliament and being applauded by your fellow parliamentarians, the EU is more conservative than the British government, certainly. You've got a more balanced, it looks like, at least with the leadership of Havel and you and others, a better understanding of what really works in economics. We've got former Soviet Union satellite countries that are pursuing lower taxes, more prosperity than we're seeing America and Britain these days.
Not really. I mean, I wish that were true. What you saw was about 5 people sitting around me applauding.
I like the old guy sitting next to you, by the way.
Yeah, he's really cool. He's a British conservative, and he was applauding. And yeah, he's really happy about that. But the truth is, no, the EU is a statist and socialist.
So Havel is just in charge because it was his turn.
Klaus is the guy. Yeah, he's unusual. And you know what? When he came to the Parliament, they walked out. They sneered at him and shouted at him and walked out when he said what he said. And the really funny thing is that he had made the most moderate speech. He said, the EU doesn't necessarily have all the answers, and in a democracy, you sometimes have to listen to different points of view, and all governments are stronger where there's an opposition, right? Pretty platitudinous stuff, difficult to disagree with. And they shouted abuse and walked out, and the really funny thing is that they walked out just as he had got to the bit where he was saying that you sometimes have to listen to points of view you don't agree with. So he said, look, you're not going to listen. No, shut up, we're not going to listen. And
well, they were late for the protest out at the G20. How do we turn this around? I mean, both in our country and in Europe and in Britain, Daniel, how do we turn this around? Does it have to literally collapse as we look at kind of economic models? Does it have to completely collapse for the people to wake up to the reality that you cannot, as you pointed out, tax your way into prosperity, spend your way into wealth, burden yourself to unburden your economic system? You can't do the wrong things and have it turn out the right way.
Sadly, it had to exhaust itself last time, didn't it? We had to go through the experience of the 70s. We had to go through the stagflation and the debt and the breakdown of everything. We went through the collapse in the Callahan years, you in the Carter years, before people understood that something different was necessary, in your case Reagan, in our case Thatcher. I hope that our generation doesn't have to go through that whole experience again, that we can kind of short-circuit the lesson learning here.
Man, it's an Atlas Shrugged moment all over the world, and hopefully we don't have to get to that point. Hey, keep up the great work. Political future, what can we look for from you down the line? We want you back on again, by the way. You're a welcome honorary American guest anytime here on the Steve Gill Show. What's your political future?
Do you know, I tell you one thing, I'd like to try and help some people in the U.S. wake up to how bad the EU is from their point of view, how anti-American it is, how hostile it is to U.S. interests, and how bad it is for personal freedom.
We'll help you do that, and look forward to talking with you again. Daniel Hannan, European Member of Parliament, the youngest guy, 1999, elected to the Parliament, and doing more beyond his years. Keep it up, man. We appreciate you. You're a Good leader, and if you ever change your mind about that whole Constitution thing, we'd welcome you over here.
Thanks, Steve. I'll bear that in mind.
Thanks, Daniel.